Hey everyone, Farid here, and welcome back to the Rational Farid. Quick question for you. Have you ever wondered why so many religions across different cultures and times seem to share some oddly similar stories? Like the hero's journey, divine births, miraculous events? What if I told you that some of the most iconic, fundamental elements of the Christian narrative, the stuff we've been told is completely unique, divine, and unprecedented, actually sound a lot like narratives from another major ancient religion that was flourishing before Christianity even hit its stride? Today, we're ripping open the history books to explore something truly wild: the gospel before Christ. We're going to dive deep into the Roman mystery cult of Mithraism and uncover its genuinely disturbingly similar connections to early Christianity, all based on the historical sources we have. Get ready, because this is going to make you rethink everything. So picture this: the Roman Empire, centuries before Christianity became the dominant force. Back then, one of the biggest players on the religious stage wasn't Jesus, it was Mithras. Mithraism was massive, a truly significant universal religion of that era, stretching from Rome all the way to the far reaches of the empire. But here's the kicker: it was a bit of an exclusive club. We're talking a mystery cult, primarily for men, super popular among soldiers, merchants, and anyone with a bit of social ambition. Think of it as the elite, invite-only spiritual experience of the Roman world. Now, you can imagine how early Christians felt about this rival. They weren't fans. In fact, historical sources show them calling Mithraism an implacable foe, precisely because, and I quote, its mysteries was disturbingly similar to the cult of Christ. Yeah, they noticed it too. The similarities were so blatant that early church fathers like Justin Martyr and Tertullian had to come up with an explanation. And their go-to? Diabolic mimicry. Yep, they genuinely believed Satan himself was behind Mithraism, just copying their sacred rituals to confuse people. Pretty convenient, right? But a more rational look at the sources suggests something far more interesting. These similarities weren't random coincidences or demonic ploys. They likely stemmed from a common ancestry, filtered through diverse but neighboring cultures. We're talking about influences from Persian Zoroastrianism, potentially impacting both the roots of Judaism, which Christianity sprang from, and Mithraism. It was a shared cultural soup, if you will. So why did Christianity ultimately win this religious turf war? It certainly wasn't about divine intervention, at least from my rational perspective. It was largely a strategic advantage. Christianity was simply more inclusive. While Mithraism kept its doors mostly shut to women and focused on the accomplished, Christianity welcomed everyone: the poor, the uneducated, the marginalized. That broader appeal, over about 300 years, allowed it to eclipse its male-dominated rival. Fascinating, isn't it? How practicalities often explain what we might attribute to the divine. Okay, so let's zoom in on the very beginning, their origins, their miraculous births. We all know the famous nativity story for Jesus, the virgin birth, the stable, the whole 9 yards. But Mithras? He also had a miraculous origin story, though it's a bit rockier. Pun intended. Sources say Mithras was literally begotten of a rock. Yep, he's depicted naked, emerging directly from stone, which they call the Petra Genitrix. That's the rock that gives birth in Latin. How's that for a unique origin? This rock connection is actually super strong throughout Mithraism, even showing up on their coins. And here's where it gets really interesting for Christians. Later Christian writers, perhaps trying to integrate existing symbolic language, also linked Christ to a worshipful stone. And of course, you've got the foundational legend of St. Peter, whose very name means rock, and who is famously described as the rock upon which the church would be built. Coincidence? Maybe. But the parallels are certainly there. Now, for a truly spicy detail: the birth of Mithras, who was often referred to as the unconquerable sun, was celebrated annually on, drumroll please, December 25th. That date was the climax of the midwinter Saturnalia festival, a huge deal in the Roman world. And guess what? According to renowned historian Sir James Fraser, the church later, quite strategically, moved Jesus' official birthday to this exact date, essentially hijacking a wildly popular, pre-existing pagan festival. So, was it divine timing or a clever marketing move? When you start lining up all these pieces, it makes you seriously question how many of these unique divine events were actually, well, just part of the shared cultural and religious tapestry of the ancient world. Don't you think? Alright, let's talk about the main event, the absolute cornerstone of Mithraism, the sacrifice. When you see images of Mithraeus, 9 times out of 10, you're looking at the tauroctony. That's the iconic scene where Mithraeus is shown sacrificing a primordial bull. He's usually depicted in a cave, which often represented the entire universe to them, pinning down this massive bull. He's got a dagger in hand, often seen plunging it into the bull's throat, or interestingly, sometimes described as being pierced in his side. Now, look closely at these reliefs. You'll often see a bunch of strange details around him. A dog eagerly licking the bull's blood, a snake slithering towards it, a scorpion hilariously or disturbingly targeting the bull's manhood, and a raven or crow nearby. These weren't just random artistic flourishes. They were all packed with symbolic meaning, representing constellations and cosmic forces. This wasn't some literal slaughter happening in their small underground temples, mind you, although sacramental meat was definitely a part of their communal meals. No, this was a powerful mystical image. The core meaning, through this bull's sacrifice, and remember, it's Mithras sacrificing the bull, not himself. He was seen as the savior of mankind. His act was believed to rejuvenate the world for the benefit of mankind. The flowing blood from the bull wasn't just gore, it was life-giving, literally seen as fertilizing the earth and renewing creation. Now, does that sound familiar? The central, world-altering theme of salvation coming through a profound sacrifice is absolutely central to Christianity too. Of course, the key difference is who is being sacrificed: a bull in Mithraism and Jesus himself in Christianity. But the fundamental idea that a sacred sacrifice brings life, renewal, and salvation for humanity, that core concept is undeniably shared. It makes you wonder about the universal human need for these kinds of narratives, doesn't it? Alright, this is where it gets really uncanny, folks. When we look at the actual day-to-day rituals and practices of Mithraism, you'll find parallels that are not just thematic, but incredibly specific. Almost like someone was looking over someone else's shoulder. For starters, Mithraists had their own version of a communal sacred meal, often called a Lord's Supper or Eucharist. Initiates would gather to share bread and a cup, which might have contained water or a wine substitute. The belief was that by partaking in this meal, they were ingesting supernatural virtue. And get this, one source even suggests the bread might have been little hot cross buns. Now tell me that doesn't make your eyebrows rise. Early Christian critics, like Justin Martyr and Tertullian, were so unnerved by these similarities that they couldn't help but comment on them. They explicitly called this Mithraic meal a devilish imitation of the Eucharist, or an oblation of bread, orchestrated by Satan himself to trick believers. Think about that for a second. They didn't deny the similarities. They attributed them to demonic trickery. It's almost hilariously desperate, isn't it? But it doesn't stop there. Tertullian, another prominent church father, listed even more startling parallels. He observed that Satan's followers, meaning the Mithraists, received marks on the foreheads, just like Christians with the sign of the cross. He also noted that these celebrated an image of a resurrection, which, while not a direct parallel to Jesus' resurrection, certainly points to a shared concept of spiritual renewal or a symbolic rising. Furthermore, he pointed out that their chief priest was limited to a single marriage, and they even had practitioners of continence or virgins. And if that wasn't enough, Mithraists also used holy water for purification rituals, and even for regeneration, as described by Tertullian. Again, a practice eerily similar to Christian baptism and holy water use. Plus, followers of Mithraism were enjoined to keep his commandments for a good life and to secure favorable hopes for the afterlife. When you line all of these up, the sacred meal with bread and cup, like hot cross buns, the forehead marks, the idea of resurrection, the holy water for purification and regeneration, and the keeping of commandments, it's a lot more than just a few coincidences. It paints a picture of two religions operating in a very similar spiritual marketplace, drawing from a common well of ideas and practices that were simply in the air at the time. It profoundly challenges any notion of Christian originality, doesn't it? So, after all his earthly labors, all his sacrifices, and establishing his mysteries, what happens to Mithras? Well, much like the Christian narrative of Jesus' ascension, Mithras completes his mythological journey by ascending to heaven. He's often depicted riding triumphantly in the chariot of the sun god, Sol, signifying his divine return to the celestial realm after his work on earth is done. It's the ultimate culmination of his story, mirroring that familiar narrative arc of a divine figure returning to the heavens. And what did this mean for his dedicated followers? The mysteries of Mithraism, just like Christianity, offered powerful promises. Through their initiation and adherence, followers were given the hope of spiritual renewal, potentially being reborn, renatum, and created anew, creatum. This wasn't just about this life, it offered good hopes for the afterlife, a promise of future happiness and salvation, contingent on them keeping his commandments. Much like the path to salvation in Christianity, it was a faith that provided a clear path for living in this world, and a comforting promise for what came after. The allure of such a narrative, a divine figure who sacrifices and then ascends, offering hope and rebirth to his followers, clearly resonated deeply within the ancient world. So, let's put it all together. When you look at Mithraism, the miraculous birth from a rock, the December 25th birthday, the central sacrifice for salvation, the communal meal with bread and cup, the use of holy water, the emphasis on keeping commandments, and even the ascension to heaven, the parallels with early Christianity are frankly striking. And this isn't some fringe theory cooked up today. Ancient pagan critics saw it plain as day, accusing Christianity of just copying popular motifs, and early Christians saw it too. But their rather imaginative explanation was that it was the devil being a copycat, preemptively mimicking Christian rituals to mislead people. Hilarious, but it definitely highlights that the similarities were undeniable even then. From a rational historical perspective, these sources suggest something else entirely. They tell us that early Christianity didn't just appear in a vacuum, a completely unique divine revelation. Instead, it emerged within a rich, competitive, and highly interactive religious landscape. It was part of a shared cultural soup, where stories and rituals about savior gods, miraculous births, life-giving sacrifices, and communal meals were already widely circulating and resonating with people. This isn't about proving one religion copied another in a simple, linear way. It's about understanding that these powerful narratives and practices were part of the fabric of the ancient world. Christianity, in its rise, likely adopted, adapted, and reinterpreted many of these existing motifs to make its message relatable and compelling to a diverse audience. It makes you really wonder about the claims of divine originality, doesn't it? What do you think about these similarities? Do you see them as more coincidence, or something more profound about how religions evolve? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this insightful, please hit that like button, subscribe to the Rational Farid for more explorations like this, and share this video with anyone who might find it interesting. Thanks for watching.